I'm super excited. Today's webinar is Military Families Epitome of Strong and Flexible. Guys, I thought that this would be such a great conversation for us to have a discussion because oftentimes military service members are acknowledged, they're celebrated, they get recognized all the time, everywhere for their strength, for their ability to go out and save and keep our country safe. However, behind the scenes of most great military members are these fantastic, resilient family members who hold down the home front. And I thought, in honor of Military Appreciation Month, National Military Appreciation Month, that we would appreciate and recognize those military families who hold it together and who are crucial pieces in the success of service members all over the country. So it is my great pleasure and honor to have them with me today on today's webinar and to have this conversation. So I'm just going to go through and just give like give a short bio of each person, okay? And Andrea Long is, go ahead and wave, Andrea. Hey, Andrea. Andrea Long is a wife of 23 years to an Army veteran and a mother of two. She's a co-founder and executive pastor of Strive Ministries, which is a family resource center. She is also the founder and CEO of Women Have a Purpose on the Move Incorporated. This is a women's leadership development ministry, which Andrea developed in 2021. She's involved in the co-led with VSN, Veteran Spouse Network, based out of the University of Texas at Austin. She volunteers for the Military Veteran Peer Network. She's a member of the National Parent Café leadership team at Be Strong Families. Whoop, whoop. In her free time, she likes to pursue music and graphic design. She enjoys being a mentor for youth and young adults. Welcome, Andrea. Marie Rochelle. Marie Rochelle is the loving wife of Colonel Maurice E. Rochelle. Underdog. They were married in January of 1982 and became a part of the Illinois Army National Guard family later in that same year. Colonel Rochelle served as an officer in the U.S. Army for over 39 years with his devoted wife by his side. Marie enjoyed a fulfilling career as sales and marketing manager before leaving the workforce. She now splits her time between volunteering and her family. Over the years, Marie has served in several not-for-profit organizations, including the USO, the Salvation Army, the Ronald McDonald House, and the Contact Ministries. She also devotes her heart to the church through leading discussion groups and Bible Study Fellowship International and other outreach projects to the community. Kenia. Oh, did you wave, Marie? Wave, Marie. Yay. Kenia Sawyer. Kenia was born in Juarez, Mexico, Chihuahua, and moved to the USA at age 15. Kenya currently holds a master's degree in public administration. She has two children, Alexa, who's 8, and Nicholas, who's 6. Kenya has been a military wife for 10 years. Her husband, Sean, has served in the Air Force for the last 14 years. And then, lastly, Jessie Smith. Last but not least, Jessie Smith. Wave, did you wave, Kenya? Yay! Oh, we have two more. I'm sorry. Jessie Smith. Mr. Jessie Smith is from Tyler, Texas. After graduating from John Tyler High School, he attended Stephen F. Austin State University in Nacogdoches, Texas. I'm sure I screwed that up. He then enlisted in the Army, serving 23 years before retiring in 2009 as E-Aid Master Sergeant. He has a Bachelor's of Science in Information and Technology Management and Master of Business Administration Finance. After his retirement, he worked at Seoul American High School, Department of Defense Dependent Schools as a junior ROTC Sergeant Master Instructor for 250 cadets. After a year, he decided to switch over to teaching business and personal finance for 5 years. He currently works at America's High School as a parent liaison. He is married to Janine of 32 years. They have 3 children, David, Jesse, and Asia, and 4 grandkids. Mr. Jesse Smith is a proud member of Phi Beta Sigma and the ancient Arabic order of the Nobles Mystic Shrine. He volunteers extensively in the community with various organizations. His hobbies are bowling and reading. And then last but not least, did you wave, Jesse? All right. Dana Vassos. Dana Vassos is a newly divorced single mom of 3 amazing girls, aged 9, 9 through 16, adopted from the foster care system. At her wisen age of 50, she has been a teacher from ages 3 to adults, special education teacher, Special Olympics area director, domestic victim advocate, sexual assault advocate, education advocate, foster parent, and adoptive parent. Whew. One day, she may tell you about her days as a private investigator or cookie bouquet maker. She has had great successes and massive failures in parenting and in life, and is still upright and walking today. A lifelong learner with a degree in biology and postgraduate studies in emergency management, she has taken hundreds of hours of courses in crisis management, victim services, at-risk youth, child development, and parenting. These many courses have enabled her to become a strong advocate for the children in her care and a community presenter on a myriad of topics. And then I just wanted to add one other thing to Dana. Dana was also a military spouse prior to her separation, okay, of 22 years. And she was also active military, active duty. So they moved 17 physical times in 3 years and were stationed at 9 bases around the world. Woo! And I just want to jump in here to say I'm also a military wife of 23 years, veteran. So glad that's over. Yay. So welcome to the entire team. Welcome, 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 guys. And we're just gonna jump it. We're gonna start the conversation. Dana, did you wave? All right, cool. So we are going to start this conversation off with just a couple of questions. I did already talk about you all's time in the service, so I'm not going to go there again. But I would ask you, what was the hardest thing about being a military spouse? And even Jesse talked about that he was military, and then now he's a spouse of a military person. What's the difference with that? And then, so yeah, what was the hardest thing about being a military spouse?
Well, for me, it's not exactly. We both was in the military at the exact same time.
Mm-hmm.
So we done our time together at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And we're both military active and both spouse, of course. So the spouse part for me was when she had to deploy or when she had to go to field exercises or when she was gone. So then that left me to be the spouse part as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's definitely different. And especially, we hear the word spouse. Unfortunately, we always think of a woman, right? There are a lot of male spouses that are at home as well or taking care of the kids. That was hard for me.
Really?
It was really difficult for me at first because I was active duty, but then I had to, we had the baby and, the little boy and then the girl, and it was hard. I mean, I didn't know how to do hair. I know there are bigger issues than that, but I'm just saying that was just part of it, right? A lot of things, though, but it was good. I'm not gonna take too much of everybody's time, but it was a great experience to be in active duty, to see it from all different sides, from being a spouse, but also as I, raised in rank, I also got to the position where I had to take care of spouses or get information to spouses, to do things for spouses as a soldier when their soldier was deployed. So I have those type of experiences when it comes to that type of stuff.
Yeah, thank you. And then anyone else? What was the hardest thing about being a military spouse?
I would say I was in the military as well and became a spouse later on. And the most difficult part for me was this was back in the day before cell phones and before the internet. So we were stationed all over the world and had little to no contact with any family members back home. And you would see them maybe, if you were lucky, once a year, generally every 2 years for about a month at a time. And that was it. And that was pretty much your interaction with your home. It was the hardest part about being a military spouse is, and I was talking with Sarita about this earlier, it's like a marriage of one, because you have to take care of the house, the home, the kids, everything outside of what the military is going to take care of. And you are completely responsible for it, with almost none of the support that the military spouse has. There are great organizations now. There's a lot more available to spouses now, but this was back in the day when a family support center, they showed you how to get a job on whatever base you were. And that was about the extent of their input to family spouse. And it was hard. It was hard. It was hard not knowing the language. It was hard not knowing what was expected of you. We didn't get those handouts back then of these are appropriate behaviors in the country you are at. These are non-appropriate behaviors in the country you're at. These are places to avoid. These are things that you should and should not do. So it was a complete blind adventure, but that was the part that was the most challenging, is going into this place and you feel like you're a fish out of water every time you step foot on a new base. And it was just kind of floundering your way through and trying to figure out, okay, where do we live? Are we living on the base? No. Okay. How do I get to the base from where we're living? Can we even own a car here? Okay, we can own a car. Great. How do I get gas in this country? Because it's not as easy as I'm used to. It just like, how do you pay your utility bills when the people don't speak English? There's so many pieces and parts to it. And for the most part, whoever is the spouse who's there 24/7 taking care of the home is the person that kind of falls to, just because the military spouse may be gone for up to 6 months to a year to 3 years from where you're stationed. And it is a challenge. It definitely is.
Woo! You just brought up some stuff. I'm like, oh Lord Jesus, you just I think I'm triggered or activated or whatever you want to call it. Marie, did you want to weigh in?
I think back on one of the hardest things, even though we are considered or are the military spouse, it seems like sometimes the Army or the Navy or whatever, they seem to be the spouse. They get the preference. They are, most important. And when you have service members, they are honorable and they are loyal to the mission. And so then it seems sometimes that the Army or the military comes first or came first, and you were like, wait, what about me? What about me? When you're back, I need you to be with me, not still where you were. But, it is another thing that was hard for me, I think, was he had taken care of the finances for all the time. So then when he got deployed, it was like, okay, here, you do everything. And then I remember tax day one year, he was in Egypt, and I waited to April, 15th at 6 p.m. to do well, now it's in the middle of the night, for me, or the time differences. And I just remember him trying to be calm and me trying to be calm, like, I don't think taxes are going to happen this year on time, because we're just different places. So it was hard, being apart and having to feel like you're being cheated on with this other wife.
With this other wife. Say it again. With the other wife.
Right, with the other wife.
Right. Jesse just dropped the mic. You almost had me speak in tongues. Ooh, the other wife. Oh, okay. So how did most of you all, some of you guys, how many of you guys did this with children or, with families? Yeah, yeah, same. I felt like we can just have a conversation. I felt like every time my husband left, that's when everything would happen. Like when he was home, everything was fine. As soon as he left, the stuff would hit the fan. I'm like, what in the what? Like, why is this happen? Why is this happen? And I'll share this too. It was so funny recently. So, I travel for my job and I travel a lot. And when my husband was traveling, okay, he was in the military, I remember like all we would hear about is the fun stuff. He wouldn't come like talking about how much hard work they did while they were there, blah, blah, blah. He would be talking about, oh, we went to, the guys went to this and we went to a bar, or we did this. And I'm thinking, wow, I'm here with all these freaking kids. And the bill people keep calling me and and the stuff for the car and this and that. And I just felt completely overwhelmed most times when he was out of town. So then when he wanted to do other things, I would be like, what do you mean do other things? Like, you've been gone for 2 weeks. Like, you've been living it up. And he's like, I've been working. And I'm like, you've been living it up. And so now we've switched places and I'm traveling, and he's like, I'm like, I want to go go visit some friends. And he's like, what do you mean? Remember that? And I'm like, but at the time we didn't have, I'm like, at the time we had all the external stuff, which we don't have now. So he could do whatever he wants to do now. Did you guys have any similar experiences or feel like that?
Okay, for me, I was just gonna say the hardest thing for me was my identity, holding on to my identity. So, and in supporting him. So that was the thing for me as a military spouse, because it was always drop what you're doing, and I didn't get the award ceremony.
That part, Andrea, that part.
Yeah, so it was hard for me to know what my identity was, and it wind up, that's what I took on, was I'm the military spouse. And I realized I was taking that as my badge of honor. And when he retired, I was like, okay, now I can't take on that badge no more, So for me, the hardest thing was to reestablish myself and not take on that as my identity. Even though I'm supporting him, I still have a life. Like, you still need to go to school. And I didn't do that in the beginning. I didn't even think, oh, you need to go to school, you need to do something. And for me, I lost a lot of years supporting him. So that was the hardest thing, was to reestablish myself after 20 years had passed. So that was my hardest thing, being a military spouse for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
And, and I was going to add to that, you are expected to have everything under control, because they're out there, they're training and they're doing all the, working, whatever, they're deployed. You need to have everything under control, because you don't want to put any pressure on them. They already having all this training. So you're expected to have everything in your house under control. And that to me was the hardest part. It's like, wait a minute, it just like Andrea said, okay, so I'm a military spouse, but then, what else? It's like, this is it. I just need to take care of my kids and make sure that everything is okay here, home. That way he's not taking everything, whatever he's going, training, deployment, or anything. So
I guess I would ask, how difficult or how easy is it to have a life outside of, if you're a full-time military spouse with children? How easy
challenging.
is it to
It's really
have
challenging. Part of the issue is that when you're managing the kids and your spouse comes back into that picture, if you're one of the people that your spouse has deployed a lot, that your spouse is just kind of bouncing back into the picture, but they have the expectation when they come back into the picture that they're in charge again. And the kids are like, no, what? Like, mom doesn't do that. Mom doesn't do that. That's not what mom does. And then you have this resentment, this tension building, because it's like, dude, I'm coming back to parent my kids and step into this role. And they won't even let me, for crying out loud. There was a lot of that kind of tension. And I think the people that did it the most successfully were the people that maintained their identity, that had their thing outside of their kids, outside of their spouse, that they could hold on to. And whether that was knitting, whether that was a job, whether that was traveling, whatever that was for them, that they had a space that they cultivated for themselves. Those were, I felt, the most successful spouses.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit, because I saw most of you guys like nodding your heads and stuff. Let's talk about that frustration of the spouse being gone and you running everything. And then when they get back, like that shift, because that's real.
I guess for me, it was, I had to acknowledge that I'm going to be petty today, because
I'm going to be petty.
Yeah, because my radio station, that was always the first, was like, I had my button and then I'm like, wait a minute, that's not my radio station. Because my car was my sanctuary. I'm sucking off. No, I'm just kidding. But I'm just saying, that little thing made a big deal for me. Is, hey, I'm not at your job. This is my area. You know what I mean? So don't come changing up stuff that I have already established, because I'm not going to your job changing up stuff. And had to really be more vocal in, hey, this is my radio station, this is my sanctuary. And that's what I said, I had to guard those things in order to be successful. And it did come off kind of petty, but that was my safeguard, to acknowledge that, hey, I don't have, because the military spouse gets awarded. I didn't have my ceremony. Yeah, I got my but I don't have those mark benches like they do.
Benchmarks.
The badge of honor. And so for me, there were certain things that was my badge of honor. When I saved $100 to get a dress, you better say that dress looks good. So I had to vocalize my badge of honor. I saved us groceries for me. You know what I mean? I did those coupons. I clipped those things. Look, I saved $1,000 for me to go to school. And a lot of people don't see that was some of the things that us as military spouses, because it is expensive to move. Yes, they did help us, but it is expensive. And so I took on my badge of honor and like, look, honey, and that dress, you better say it looks good. You know what I mean? That's what I did. Yeah.
Yeah. Did anyone have, did you guys have a soldier that went away that served in war time? Anyone? And how did you manage that being away in the war piece?
Mine went to Afghanistan for 9 months, but see, I was pregnant and I didn't know anything about the military at first, because that's when we first got married. That's when we were like, okay. And then he's like, hey, I'm leaving. I'm going to Afghanistan. I'm going to be gone for 9 months. And then I'm like, oh, okay. So now what? He's like, oh, I'll give you a call whenever I have a chance. I'm like, wait a minute, what do you mean you're going to give me a call when you have a chance? I started thinking, I was like, oh, maybe he'll call me like daily, maybe like for 5 minutes. For those 9 months, he never called me on the phone. And I was able to email him twice. And that was only like, hey, I got an ultrasound, here you go. And then he'll answer back, oh, cool. I was like, oh, okay, so that's it. Only email twice. So that was my experience.
Wow. Did anyone else have a service member that served in the war?
Well, my wife and I both did at different times. And so to capture some of the things y'all was talking about before, when we were coming back, both of us would deploy, one to deploy, the other one to deploy. So we went through that transaction all the time, a lot, when it comes to my space or my radio station, or or this is how I keep the towels folded, and now you changing it, and this is how I set up my side, my vanity area, and now you changing it. So we went through that throughout our whole 22 years of being together in the military to do that to that end. The good thing about it, my wife Janine, we both understood both sides of it, I guess, because we were in both sides of it. So that made it easier for us. That made it a lot easier for us. But I remember having been deployed, and just like she said, I would get deployed without notice sometimes. I was on recall, and I could be gone for 2 months at a time. We out somewhere having a good time at dinner, get a phone call, be at the airstrip in 2 hours. So I would get that call, and I would leave, and I might have come back for 2 months without being able to contact with her. I remember being in the desert, and we were both in the war, and she was in the rear somewhere, and she seen that this Sergeant Smith had got injured. And she hadn't heard from me for, I think, about 2 months at that time. And all she could think about was that, and it was from an engineer unit like I was in. So all she thought it was me. And she said she remembered being at the medical facility waiting on the chopper to come in, and it wasn't me. Thankful for her, but excited for the soldier. But we didn't hear from each other one time at like 3 or 4 months in the war. And that was really difficult. But we made it through. We persevered and we made it through, of course. But that was difficult to do. And I can imagine as a spouse who's not in the military, how hard and difficult that would be for you all. So that's definitely something different. I can imagine how hard that would be.
Yeah, my husband served in Iraq and he was gone for a year and a half. And I remember us not, my mother-in-law decided, making a conscious decision to not watch the news at some point. And at the time, you had AOL, remember? And every time you turned on, every time I brought up my computer, turned on my, opened the web browser, it was X amount of, soldiers shot and killed. It's like, what? Like, so I remember us making a conscious decision to no longer watch the news, period. And I had to not go online because it was peace shattering, and not being able to talk to them for months was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what's going on. It's like, it was, yeah. Yeah, we were conscious about that, and about not watching the news because we couldn't, or reading the news or anything that had to do with the military, because if something came across, it was like, oh my gosh, is he there? Is that happening with them? Is it, what do you do? So I don't know. Does anybody else have a similar experience?
For me, my husband, he was deployed for almost a year and a half. So he was supposed to be on a peacekeeping mission. It was a multinational force and observer peacekeeping mission to keep the peace between, or oversee the peace between Egypt and Israel. And so you think, oh, peacekeeping, that's wonderful. Well, during that time, that's when I don't know if you remember, the Egyptians decided to overthrow their government. And so then you had all this war going on, and they were getting deployed to the border, and then the people from Egypt were coming over, and it was a big mess. And so we didn't hear from him for a while, and just thinking about, okay, what does this mean? I'm thinking, you said this was a peace, this would be peaceful. And to be in between the borders of the war going on either side, it was a very trying time.
Mm-hmm. I remember we used to sit and watch CNN, because so often CNN got the information before any of us did about what was happening. And so that was like the morning ritual, was you'd get up and you'd see what was happening. Like, is anything happening where anybody that I care about is going on? Because it could be days, if not weeks later, before it finally trickled down through the military channels to get to where it needed to be. And it's hard to live in that limbo. And I think that's the one thing that they really do a disservice for military spouses. They don't prepare you to deal with that emotion. They don't prepare you how to handle that unknowing and that fear and still get through your day-to-day life. Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the biggest neglectful areas for military spouses that there is.
Yeah. My husband was, when I was stationed in Germany, we just got married, and it was when 9/11 hit. And that's when I had to deal with him deploying and doing that. And being so mad because everybody's like, y'all need to just go to war. And I'm thinking, like, this is going to affect our families. And I didn't have any children at the time, but I remember him just leaving, and I'm like, hey, I'm seeing the towers, I'm seeing, so I'm already got images. And so that's what I had to deal with, being alone, away from my family, and my husband leaving me. And I think we weren't even married a year yet, and we had to go to war. So yeah, that was my experience of him going to war and not knowing. But there were some good things out of that, because I bonded with some incredible women. I never saw such a bonding of us coming together. And it didn't matter of race, it didn't matter of culture, it didn't matter of nothing. We all bonded as military spouses in that moment. I remember, because I was living off base, and this lady knocked on my door, and we ran because we saw it on the Today Show, and we all bonded together and was like, we're going to get through this. So to this day, I have a best friend because we bonded in that moment, because we had that common ground our spouses leaving at that time. So yeah, that was my experience. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's when my mother-in-law became close, because we were probably about 10 years in when 9/11 happened, and that's when we got close, because for the same reason. It was like, are you praying? Have you heard from him? Have you heard from him? I don't know. Okay, I'm having a rough day today. In addition to managing my own emotions, in addition to the emotions of my children who were struggling with, the same, like, where's daddy? Oh my gosh, is he okay? And, and all of that. Did you guys have to, how did you handle the aftermath of soldier returning from war?
I guess for me, I loved my husband the more. Our love was deepened at that time. And I'm pretty sure I wasn't the only one. You see babies coming up after that. I realized I truly cared about him. I know that sounds crazy, but it wasn't superficial. Just for him to come back in one piece, because there are soldiers that are in one piece, but they're still not together. You know what I mean? They're not there. And so my husband came back in one piece with the same mindset. So I was very grateful. And I was able to do some things. And so we were very rejoiceful. It was just the two of us. So we were able to, it was a bonding moment, even with me and him, for me.
Anyone else? How'd you handle the aftermath of your soldier returning from war? Jesse, I saw you go. What was that about?
Oh no, my daughter named Asia. She was, yeah, that was a Desert Storm, Desert Shield, Iraqi Freedom. Hence Asia, but no, it was the absent makes the heart fonder. It is a very true cliche or saying. Like she said, to get your spouse back and they're safe back with you, you feel that appreciation for them now. That you missed them and you get to hug them again and get to kiss them and get to hold them. And not only that, it makes you feel safe again too. It gives you that, because while they're in danger, you feel in danger, you feel unsafe, right? And on top of all that, so to have them back, it's just that goosebumps that runs through you, and it gives you that feeling. So how do we handle it? We enjoyed it. We embraced it. And like she said, it made us stronger together. It made us feel good. It made you stronger as a family.
Thank you, Marie.
Yeah, and I would even venture to say it was the support of friends, support of my church, the marriage ministry that we were a part of, and Sarita as well, because when Greg came back, well, her husband's name is Greg, when he came back, we got a chance to talk about, them being how they are present and not present when they come back, the difficulties, even though they're home, but their hearts are still overseas with their buddies that are still, fighting and defending our freedom. And so Sarita taught me, or we worked it together, I think, just to be patient, to read up on things that talked about, spouse or military men and how they re-enter, their families. So that was important, I think. And I learned that from Sarita because I got a chance to just talk with her when Greg had come back. And so it even prepared me when my husband came back. So I think there is a lot of validity, as the one panelist said, but having support, having friends, having those wives that could step in and be there for you.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, because mine was a little different. we did have, yes, I was super excited for him to come home. Super excited, like, yes, yay, my husband is coming home. However, nobody prepares military spouses back in the day or the families for what to expect when your spouse doesn't come home the way that they left. Because my experience was he was quite different. Yes, he still loved his family. Yes, he wanted to be home, but then there was all this trauma behind and PTSD that comes with that. And so I did have to do a lot of research because we didn't have those resources. Nobody told us that daddy was going to come back completely different. Nobody told us how to figure those things out. So I did have to do a lot of, like, researching, calling people. I remember going to Marie's husband, who is my big brother, and I went to him, was like, I'm gonna kill him. Like, I don't understand what's going on with him. I'm about to kill. What is wrong with him? And he's like, well, he's just getting back from he's been conditioned to be angry for a year and a half so that he can survive. And so once he comes home, then he is what's the word? He's trying not to kill you. He's trying to, because they don't, when soldiers are in the field, nobody asks them questions. They just say, if he says jump, all the soldiers say, yay, how high? He's like, if he come home and say jump to you, you're going to be like, why am I jumping? What am I doing? Where am I going? Blah, blah, blah. Why am I, blah, blah, blah. He's like, so he's really trying not to, trying to kill you as well. I was like, oh, okay, well, puts things in different perspective. But that was also a learning curve for me as a military spouse because I understand how they come back, and then there's the aftermath of war, and it stays around for quite some time. Like he would go to counseling with his soldiers. He wouldn't go to counseling because he felt like he didn't need it, right? So those kinds of things are that I think are unique to military families and that most people don't recognize or see that part of it, that part of, being with service member who comes home and is different after war. We had a question that I want to get to. Was someone said, aside from the issues of being a parent, how did you keep your relationship going through the separation and all the changes?
We did these weird little things to stay connected when he would go places. Um, because at the beginning, because of his career field, he went to places that were typically safe, as safe as European places could be for an American at that time. But he would go and he'd be telling me about all these awesome times he was having and all these cool things he was seeing. And he'd bring back pictures of all these wonderful things that he did while he was gone. And I'm like, I'm stuck in the apartment that doesn't have running water for a month. What the hell? Like seriously. And so it was one of those things that was like, how can we stay connected? And so his nickname was Tigger when he was a little boy. And so I bought him a stuffed Tigger. And what I did was I would tuck that into his suitcase when he left. And he would take Tigger when he took his pictures, and there'd be the little Tigger. And it was just kind of his way of saying that I was with him and we still shared the connection, even though he was in a different place doing different things. And so it was just a sweet, goofy little thing, but it was just that little bit of connection that we had.
For us, my husband, it's a huge Star Trek person. So when he goes to trainings, he can be texting or he can just be calling every single day. And that's something I learned now, right? That if I text him, he's not probably going to text me back until probably later the evening or something. So what we started doing is that, oh, hey, I would he would text me good morning and I'm like, hey, good morning, how are you doing? And then he wouldn't answer until the evening. So I was like, okay, well, you know what? I'm going to put a little bit of, me to tell him like, hey, what's going on? So then at the end, I would, on Star Trek, they put captain's log, and then they would just say whatever was going on in their minds, right? So I would be like, wife's log. So this happened and your kid said this and your kid's over here, but then this happened, and then send it. So that he will see it the next day in the morning. Like, oh, okay. So that's what we did.
Anyone else?
So my husband's career was 39 years. So we had two different phases. So the first part of it was you actually had to write letters to each other and get mail. And I still have a box from those letters from basic training to, all the way. But and remember when you had to have a calling card, and get that card and you waited on that phone call once a week when they could get time to talk. And so we valued those times. But later on, when he deployed, we made a pact, or we designated for our relationship that we would do everything that would allow our love to flourish, even though we would be separate. We were separate. So we still wrote, but we talked about our relationship. We talked about how we could grow our love and during that time. And so I was thankful for the maturity that we had in our relationship, that before he would leave, we had this list like, okay, our love is gonna grow, we're gonna do this, all those things. And so then you could keep a check on those things or monitor those things. Or if you feel like you're lacking in those things, you could say, hey, I'm really missing you. And knowing that, it's nothing they could do about it. But, if I was needing some, some super sexy or affectionate talk, I was mature enough to say that. And he was too. And so that helped our relationship, being able to communicate in a healthy way during the absence.
I had to really think about it, because I was like, I didn't do anything. I felt kind of bad at first. But for me, me and my husband were very goal-oriented people. So again, the only time he went was when I was in Germany, and we really wanted to be out of debt and get a house at the time. So for me, that helped me to work on it. I was just trying to get us out of debt. And so I worked double jobs, and I put that in my remembrance, like, oh my God, when he comes back and he sees all the things that I've done. Now, I didn't have any children, so it was just me. And I was like, I'm going to work. And when he came back, I had literally got us out of, I think we only had one more bill left. It's like this big old thing for me. So I put something that we both had a goal in mind to keep me to stay focused. And so I worked because he wasn't there. So I worked. I was eating ramen noodles to try to like show him, look, I was a kid. And so I was just doing things to remind. It was like when I was doing those things, it made him like he was there. So, and when he came back, we got out of the debt and we were able to get that house. So that's what got me to remind me, is to remember what was our goal we had together. Okay. And people always tell me, look, this is what I want us to do. So, and I still do that to this day. I think about the goals we have together in order for me to when he's away, us working together. So that was ours.
All right. So quickly for my wife and I, just like Maria, back then the letters, that was our thing, to stay in touch with each other, to communicate with each other. But for us, it was, we would both come from a family, happy love family. So the love for family, what helped us a lot, right? And so we had this thing where we always say, take care of you until I can take care of you, right? So that was like on all our letters, right? And then I told her we missed out on a very probably influential opportunity, because she created emojis from way back then, the little devils and little hearts and all that type of stuff. So she used to put those on her letter. So I wouldn't do that at first, but then I started doing it. So it became my little thing, right? The different type of emojis back then that we was drawing on our letters. And we, like she said, we still got that box of letters from each other from from the early mid 80s to now. We still have that box. And it shows our history of our love, we call it, a pattern of our love throughout that history, right? To now and still going. So yeah, it was the connection between the letters and the little emojis back then that made a difference for us.
Wow. You guys are amazing. I felt like I got cheated a little bit because we started off with we didn't have letters. We only have a few letters because right in the midst of, to the Iraq thing, right? Then phones came out. So we only have like a couple of letters from his time of away, a couple of them, and then we got cell phones. And so I wasn't writing letters as much. And I said to him, like, dang, babe, we don't have a lot of letters because we got cell phones. And then, so we weren't doing that as much. I feel so cheated. Okay. So we're just
And
about, this is,
Sarita, and
uh-huh.
I just thought about those letters. I need to go through that box just in case when we pass away. I wouldn't want our children to read some of the stuff that we wrote in those letters. I gotta go make those letters PG. They weren't always PG.
That part, Marie. That part. So we are like 10 minutes before we have to wrap up, really 5 or whatever. Um, and what would you say to encourage a military spouse today? What would you say to encourage a military spouse who may be experiencing all those different challenges that we shared and talked about? What would you say to them to encourage them in their journey, on their journey?
Like I said earlier, from being on both sides of it, one of the things I always wanted, once I got enough rank, I guess, and then I was in charge, had to talk to military spouses. One of the things I always tried to get them to understand was that they are the most important part of the puzzle. They are. They are the most important part. They are the strength of that soldier, because the soldier knows that that spouse is okay. They can do their mission and come back safely without worrying about them back here. And so they are the most important part. They're the ones taking care of the kids. They need to be independent, learn to be independent while the soldier is gone. And so that was the thing we always tried to. I know times have changed, which is great. And even back then it changed when we got the family groups at the base level.
Mm-hmm.
So that came during my time, right? So that made a big difference right there. So in order for the families to be, you need to understand, they need to be independent, and they are the most important part of the success of a soldier's life. They need to be independent and be an important part.
Thank you, Jesse.
I would say they need to create their own community, because it is through bonding with other spouses, through bonding with people in their local neighborhoods, whether they're living on the economy or on the base. It is having those people, the real live people around you in the day-to-day, that help you get through it. And if you're lucky enough that you can share that experience with other people that are going through similar things, it's really a helpful way, and you feel like you're not alone.
I guess my advice would be, one, still be yourself in that process. Another one is to know your resources, like to dive in and go to those community centers, because that's what helped me. And then don't be ashamed if you need that counseling, because a lot of times those resources, if you have children, they will pay for your daycare. So don't make that an excuse that you have your kids and all that. They have those resources for you to go and get the help that you do need. And then I'm right with them, Dana, that make your own tribe. Now, trust the tribe, but make your own tribe when you do need that break, because you're going to need it. And then another one for me was, you are enough. You are equipped to do what you're supposed to do as a military spouse. And the reason why I'm real big on that, because he chose you for a reason. What I mean by chose, your husband know that he's going to have to leave. And when he asked you to marry you, he knew you can do that. He knew you would be able to be equipped to support him in the way he needed you to support him. Not the way others are, but the way you can support him in what you are. And so that would be my advice, is to be yourself, but yet seek help. And when you do need that help, and then create your life the way you want it. So make your tribe. So that would be my advice.
Mine will be to be patient. I think that's something that I had to learn, and that maybe you cannot make plans. And this is something that we were talking about. Maybe you cannot, hey, make vacations for this next 6 months, because something's gonna happen, and you just have to be patient. Unfortunately, we can't just be like, no, you tell the Army or the Air Force you cannot go to that training because you have plans with me. They can't do that, right? So I think that's one of the most important things that I have learned is you have to be patient and um, ask questions. And that's something that I'm still learning in the process. He will come and tell me, hey, this whatever, I don't know, he keeps saying words like cadre or this or that. I'm like, I don't know what any of that means. Like, why are you talking to me like if I know, right? So ask questions, right? Because there were a lot of people who were like, hey, what does your husband do? I'm like, I don't know, he's in the Air Force. Well, what do you mean you don't know? Well, he was doing this and he said something about this, but then he has some weird patch over here. I don't know what any of this means, and they will be like, oh, okay, never mind, we won't ask you any more questions. So then now I ask them, I'm like, okay, what does that mean? What do you mean you're gonna be doing this? Oh, well, you told me that this was going on. So and he likes that too, because then I'm acknowledging what he's doing, what he's training for or something. So that will be my little piece of advice.
Yeah. And so, of course, you all have taken all the great answers. So I agree with everything that you have said thus far. I think I would also add that you can support your husband or your spouse in their endeavors, their military career, without you losing yourself or not thinking that you are as important as the soldier next to you. Sometimes we could be at military balls. I remember we'd be at the balls, and my husband is Colonel Rochelle, so everybody's like, oh, and then you're literally just standing there, looking like a nice,
a trophy
wife. And but even in all of that, don't lose yourself to him. Those times where he is or their spouse is going away deployed, those things that you had to learn now, you learn to be in finance or taking care of the kids. Also, capitalize on the things that grew out of that time. You're better at this, you're better than, you may see that, these are the areas you want to, it might become an entrepreneur because of what you have learned, or business owner. And so, and my biggest thing too was my support. I had a great support group. It was from other military spouses and also my church. I could not have done it without God. I will say that 500 times. It was my faith as well that kept me centered and not going all crazy with his military career, because sometimes, it is a demanding career. And I learned out of that with our marriage. I knew that he would die for other people. And then I began to, in our marriage, say, wow, he would die for me. I know if he would die for those people that he doesn't even know, that he would die for me. And it just made me love him even more, to know that, he loved me that much as a soldier and as a wife. So.
Wow, thank you guys. This was such a great conversation. I see so many people or military spouses being helped by this conversation, and to know that they're not alone, because oftentimes my experience has been when people are going through things, and I remember feeling like that. Now, just as a reservist wife, I wasn't connected to all of the other resources that active duty members have. And I remember feeling so alone often, like, oh my gosh, so all, the people who are more connected to the base, they're getting the help, they're getting the this, they're getting that, and I'm alone. And so part of like having conversations like this is showing people that they're not alone. And there are resources. Even now, military families are not aware often of all the resources available to them. And so there are I'm going to ask you to take a moment and just drop in the chat if you know the resource to, if you have a military resource that you'd like to share, drop it in the chat. If you can, if you know the website or whatever, just drop in the chat as we begin to close out today's webinar. I cannot thank you enough for being a part of today's webinar. This meant a lot to me as a military spouse and being with my community to have this conversation. So thank you so much, guys. For being with us today. Andrew, I think you can put the slide back up. So today, for all of our webinars, we like to end it with a hashtag. And today's hashtag is hashtag Amplify Military Strong. And I would ask you to drop in the chat and hashtag about today's webinar. So right now we have hashtag Amplify Military Strong. What would you put in the chat? What would you amplify about today's conversation? All right, next slide, Andrew. Join us this Friday for a Taste of Cafe in honor of National Military Appreciation Month. Our cafe for this Friday is Faith Over Fear. It's the Taste of Cafe for this Friday, Faith Over Fear. We'd love to have you join us and have the conversation that you need to have around this topic. You can use the QR code and scan it. It'll take you straight to the registration page for a Taste of Cafe. All right, next, Andrew. Thank you, guys. And then join us as we spring into Vitality. I think we have one more event. It's June. If you scan the QR code, it'll take you. We are doing an escape room for June 22nd. I'm super excited about that. So for the virtual escape room, please join us on that. And if you scan the QR code, it'll take us right there, take you right to register for that. So join us as we spring into Vitality next. And then these webinars are every Monday and Wednesday in English, and Tuesdays and Thursdays in Spanish, a different topic, still just as good. Please join us. We'd love for you to come and be a part of our Be Strong Families webinar series, where we just focus on all things that the community needs to know, hear, and be aware of. Use the QR code again. It'll take you to register for our upcoming webinars. Next. And then don't forget to subscribe to YouTube. Yay! Follow us on YouTube. You'll also find today's recording and other additional great webinars on our YouTube channel. Feel free afterwards to share this today's webinar with your network so they can see and recognize how great you are and all the good work you're doing to keep America safe. Is that it, Andrew? All right. Thank you guys so much for being here today. I really appreciate each and every one of you. Jesse, stay in touch. Marie, Andrea, Dana, Kenia, always a pleasure. And thank you, Andrew, for helping us today. You rock. Andrew was our tech person. All right. Bye, guys. Don't forget to share this with your networks afterwards, okay? And keep in touch. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Hope I get invited back. We'll see.
That would be a yes, Jesse. We'll be contacting you, Lori or myself. Okay.
Thank you, Sarita. This was wonderful.
Thank you for having us.